Ladies and gentlemen, we are about 2 minutes back from getting this started, and as we are waiting, I will leave you with this musical intro as I get myself sorted on the other side here. Here we go.
Real bad boy. I've got a ton of gravel in my shoes, world on my shoulders, a heart full of blues, and in the dirt, down in the dirt. I've been a real bad boy on the town all night. Starting to calm down with the morning light. I'm in the dirt, down in the dirt. Been a real bad boy. I've been a real bad boy on the town all night. Starting to calm down with the morning light. I'm in the dirt, down in the dirt, down in the dirt, down in the dirt.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Getting to Hired, the show that is helping you, the military member, successfully transition from your military career to your new civilian one. My name is Tony Morrow, and this is the live stream. Thank you for coming back on Friday, the 18th of January, 2019. So, I am drinking lots of coffee, getting lots of energy, trying to get pumped up for you on today's live stream episode. Hopefully you enjoyed that music, courtesy of Epic Sound, and I am looking forward to getting into it today. I have my trusty cup of coffee, keep calm and carry on, keeping me up and at 'em, and well, let's just dive right into it. So, just gonna make a slight adjustment to the levels here. There we go. So in this week's episode, LinkedIn Basics Volume 2, talking about basically work experience and education, keywords, and buzzwords. And hopefully that is useful information for you. The work experience and the education piece, fairly straightforward as far as being able to understand the mechanics of how to punch that information in. And again, this is LinkedIn Basics. It is not designed to be overly complicated, as there's a limited amount of time you can explain anything. So it's really just going through the very simple steps of being able to put in that information. But what's interesting about this process, as I put out these videos trying to help all of us learn more about how to use LinkedIn, is I'm learning more about it all myself. And it was interesting. I didn't feature it in the video because I think I will feature it in a more advanced video coming later. But I'm discovering things about LinkedIn as I work on it, and little tweaks. Obviously, my profile is not perfect, and I am just trying to share my information, the lessons learned that I'm coming across, and sharing that with you. And as I go through this exercise of creating these tutorials for you, just to understand again the basics of how to do all this. I'm looking at my profile and looking at it with a much more critical eye and understanding that I'm going to dive into my profile and really rip that thing apart. A key example of that is, the iconography when you connect to organizations and you put that little icon in the corner. Now you remember from the video, and if you haven't seen the video, please, on this channel, go to the playlist of LinkedIn. Or you can see it on the videos tab. You can scroll down. It'll be one of the more recent videos if you're watching this live stream now. But when the live stream is done, go and check out the video, and you can see on my profile, or if you're watching, you can go on LinkedIn as well, and just see the fact that I've got all these logos and icons for organizations or businesses that I've run. So, for example, the first podcast I did, theaveragefather.com, I have a logo for that because I had a logo that I created for it. It was part of the kind of the requirements I needed to do to put it on Apple iTunes. And so I had to create a company page on LinkedIn to be able to associate it with in order to be able to get that logo on there. So I create a company page, and then I attach it. Basically, I attach my profile to that company page, and then the logo pops up. Same process again for getting to Hired and AT Morrow Consulting and Media Corporation Incorporated. Create the company page and input the logo, and that's really all it is. And so understanding that I did that process to be able to create those logos, I kind of did a quick audit on the icons I was using. And in the tutorial, when I go through putting in the Royal Canadian Navy, it pops up, or Canadian Navy, it pops up Royal Canadian Navy. And when I first created my profile several years ago, I had just put in, I think, Canadian Navy, and it didn't auto-populate or recommend at that time, because this was several iterations of LinkedIn back. It didn't auto-recommend Royal Canadian Navy. And at one point, I started looking through different people's profiles, and I saw that they had, Department of National Defense, Government of Canada. They had different kind of organizations that spoke to, they were a military member, and they worked for the military, and they had different profiles, had different different logos or organizations attached there. Some were Government of Canada, some were Department of National Defense, and some were Royal Canadian Navy. So I looked through, and obviously when I was doing it, Royal Canadian Navy applied to me. I was an officer in the RCN. That's what I was looking for, and so that's what I created. But when I click on that icon and I do the kind of the background check on it, Royal Canadian Navy, the icon that's listed on there is not the Royal Canadian Navy, in the sense that it's not a government-sanctioned LinkedIn profile. It does, of course, speak to the fact that you are a member of the Royal Canadian Navy, and really anyone looking at that hopefully will understand what that is, but it's not a government LinkedIn profile. And so one of the things I'm going to be doing in my more advanced videos that'll be coming later in the year is I'm going to do kind of a deep dive audit on some of these different profiles and understand, for example, if you're a military member and you're working for whichever branch of the military you are, what are the right organizations, what are the right company pages that you need to associate with? Because some of them are legit, some of them are not. And what's the value in doing that? So, for example, is there value in putting in the Royal Canadian Navy? Because whether it's benign or not, like that really speaks to who and what you were. You were part of the Royal Canadian Navy. The logo is correct. The association is correct. All the telltale signs of it are correct until you click on it, and then it takes you to the company page, and it's not NDHQ in Ottawa. It's in another location somewhere else. So does that mean that association is not valid? I don't know. I'm going to have to do a bit of a deep dive and find out more information about that. I'm going to have to dive into that company page and find out who posted it, who's the administrator for it, contact them, find that out, and things like that. And the reason why I bring that up, especially here for the live stream as a retrospective on that video, is that these are the kinds of things that you need to be doing or thinking about when you're creating your own profile, the organizations and associations that you're tied together with. Hopefully, and generally speaking, it's a straightforward exercise in the sense that you're finding the right organizations that you're connecting to, or that your organization, if you're doing it while you still belong to that company or that organization, that they have somehow put out a communication piece or can properly point you in the direction of their LinkedIn profile, their LinkedIn company page, and you can just tie to it, and that's fine. So it's just a matter of finding the right one and sorting that out. So I thought that was a good way to start off, just as a retrospective looking back on the video, and something that I want to work on going forward. Let me take a quick sip. So as the mechanics of this video, I believe, and actually I will pull up on my phone so that I can monitor it as we go. This time around, whereas the first live stream I did not have the social feature up and running, right now I have a tablet just off screen here with what's called vMix Social, which is the social media functionality as part of my software that's bringing me to you live right now, and it allows me to be able to watch the chat on the YouTube live stream. So if you're watching this live, you can punch into the chat and I'll be able to see it and respond to it right now. And I'm just going to take a second and pull this up on my phone so that I can see if anybody is connected, because that is not a feature that I am aware of that I can see here. So let's see here. Now, of course, best planning practices, you do this in advance of going live. I was running out of time this afternoon as I was getting ready for this, and so there we go. I'm live, and so I'm just going to turn the volume on that down. There we go. So I can see nobody in the chat right now, but that's okay. This entire process to get the live stream up and running and to build an audience that would tune in to the live stream and interact with the live stream to make it of more value to you, the audience. That's a long tail process, and really this is, at this point, if you're watching this on the replay, this is just another video for you to consume and to be able to add value for you. So in that regard, I'm going to progress or continue on here as if basically just adding more value for you folks as we carry on, as I'm sorting this out. Okay, there we go. So phone's up and running, watching the live stream. There we go. Okay. All right. A little warm in here under the lights. So this week I came across an interesting article, and I'll pull it up here as I'm talking. So I came across an interesting article on LinkedIn that spoke to spoke to the status that we as military members give up when we become civilians and make our way back into the workforce. And I thought that was the article in question. I thought it was really interesting because it was touching on something that I've kind of known or thought of a lot, but I didn't really know how to maybe how to describe it. And the article in question is and there's another one here I want to talk about as well, a podcast that I came across that I want to share with you. But the article in question really was really impactful to me because in a short strokes, it talked about the fact that when you're in uniform, you may not be aware of the status, prestige, respect, the kind of intrinsic value of your military position, all the trappings that come with that. And when you step outside that role and outside that organization and you move into the civilian space, you're stepping out and leaving all that behind. Now, many of us have a lot of difficulty dealing with that. We have a lot of difficulty putting our past behind us. And in the article, they talk about the way in which many of us try to hold on. So, for example, you have plaques, memories or callbacks to your military career. So maybe you have a shadow box with your the ships that you served in, badges that you've earned, accreditations that you have, your rank, and so on. All these calling cards to who and what you were as part of your military identity. And it is something that you look at and you remember and you fondly reminisce about what it was to be a military member. And granted, I'm a firm believer that once in the military, always in the military, in the sense that once you become a veteran, you will always be a veteran, and you will always be identified and associated with that. The author of the article spoke about being a Marine, a U.S. Marine, and the fact that Marines are always Marines. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And I feel that that connection to the military still exists with the other branches, in the sense that you were always a veteran, you were always in the military, you share that military culture to a certain degree with other veterans and military members for the rest of your life. It's kind of an alumni association that you can always hold on to, you can always hold up, and know that you're going to be part of that organization, you're going to be part of that community, and that community hopefully will be there and support you, and you certainly will be supported here. But as we transition into the new career, the new life, the new identity that we're creating for ourselves in our post-military career, you have to put that all aside or behind you. So you're no longer the CSM. You're no longer the the RSM. You're no longer the petty officer, the chief. You're no longer the colonel, the captain. You're no longer the person in uniform. You're no longer the director of this, or the operations officer of that, or the 2IC of this, or whatever your position was, and the label that came with it, and the responsibilities and the roles and the kind of the magnitude and the weight that came with those titles, those accolades and accreditations. All that is no longer with you. It's no longer part of who you are. And you step outside that and you become something else. And in the article, they talk about becoming Joe the new guy. And they made a reference to, you have this 20-something millennial trying to teach you how to use whatever the new software piece is that they're using at the company you're working at. Maybe it's setting up your email or something like that. And while you may have a lot of experience in IT or whatever the technology piece is in the military, I think we all know and we can all appreciate that the military is somewhat behind on the ever-evolving curve of technology. The military waits for those technologies to be proven reliable and so on, and then they adopt them. I remember, you'd look at your computer and you'd realize that you're operating some kind of like Windows version that is several generations behind what you currently have at your computer at home. And I would always just laugh. You are, as a military veteran, you are a highly trained, technical, and highly educated HR asset. You may not be educated or up to speed on the technology that is being used in the company that you're going to start working at, or the organization you're going to start working with. And so the article talks about this 20-something millennial who is a native of whatever technology that is, and they're trying to explain it to you, and the expression on that person's face is, like sympathy and pity and so on. And you see that in the person's face, and you realize that you were this thing, you were this label, this, I think in the article they talk about, like, I was commanding X number of people, and now I have this 20-something explaining me how to use the email server. And the juxtaposition of that, the difference in respect, in role, in acknowledgement, in recognition, in seeing who you are, that identity, and that is so jarring for so many of us, because there is an intrinsic value in your military career. You wear your rank on your shoulder. You have a visual representation of where you fit in the pecking order. Your title and your position and how you work within the military community brings weight and gravitas to who and what you are. Once you step outside that, you're just another person. You're just another individual working in Civvy Street. And, unless you're in a C-suite executive, and even if you are a C-suite executive, CEO, COO, whatever the acronym will be for the position you have, you are not the be-all and end-all. You don't have the gravitas, the weight behind your title and position that you did before. There are lots of managers out there. There are lots of senior directors. There are lots of whatever you want to call the title. And in the end, they're all just people doing a job. And there's no rank on your shoulder in those different jobs, those different positions. Everyone wears probably very similar clothing. Are you wearing a suit? Are you wearing business casual? Are you whatever it is you're wearing? That's what you're wearing. Now, obviously, that's a little different in things like police and firefighters and so on. Those paramilitary organizations that adopt a kind of military structure to be able to help organize and execute the operations of what they're doing. But if you're just going into the business world and some kind of or maybe nonprofit or whatever the organization is, those calling cards don't exist. And for that reason, you need to be comfortable and you need to come to terms with the fact that you're setting that aside. And so I was reading this article, and again, if you haven't seen this article, and I'm struggling here as I'm trying to find it, scrolling through my my feed here. The article is called "Loss of Status in the Military Transition." The author is Joe Pascal Sr. You can find him on LinkedIn. And I found this because I'm part of a network on LinkedIn called the Veteran Mentor Network, or veteranmentornetwork.org. So the Veteran Mentor Network, for some reason, I'm tangling up that as I'm trying to pronounce it. But the VMN is a group on LinkedIn. If you're a veteran, I strongly recommend that you join. And Joe's a member of that group, and so he put that out there. The article. Sorry, bumped a button there. I read the article and really enjoyed it, and think it has a lot of impact for us as military veterans. And I shared it, and it seems to be there's a lot of people are making comments or viewing it and finding the same thing. So if you haven't seen that article yet, I recommend you go read it. It was quite impactful to me, and again speaks to this notion of status, or what I used to think of as respect, in the sense that when I was in my military career, I think I had a lot tied into the respect piece, in the sense that when you spoke to people, and of course it depended on who you were, but functionally within the organization, there is a structural respect that you're supposed to show your superiors and your subordinates. If you're speaking to an officer of a higher rank, you say sir. If you are speaking to a subordinate, sometimes you use their rank or their position. So, for example, you speak to the buffer, that is the senior bosun mate on board ship, and or the coxswain, and the coxswain is the senior NCM on board, and that is a important and powerful, significant position, and on HMC ships, part of the command triad, as they talk about it. Or the XO or the CO, you don't necessarily you can obviously refer to the captain as sir, but I mean, it's captain and XO. And then you talk about, positions, like on board ship, you have, like I say, the buffer or the coxswain or chief eng. And then when you go to the officer side, you have the EO, CISO, the combat officer, the logo. You have these little shorts that we use to describe positions, sometimes referred to as engines and pay. But the point is that you have these labels that associate position, and with those positions come a certain degree of respect, and that is lacking in many ways. That is lacking in the civilian world, and we as military members have to come to terms with that as we transition, and look for different ways to kind of satisfy that itch or find reward for ourselves in our civilian careers, because it is so different. A lot of us have difficulty doing that, and I think that's one of the key things about military transition that we need to come to terms with, is that ability to put the status piece behind us. And really ask yourselves a question, and I know I ask myself this question, and I continually do it. How much does title, how much of a reward is that for you? Or maybe more a pertinent question is, where do you find the reward, the value in your role and your position in work? In your professional life, what is it that brings you happiness? What is it that brings you what makes you feel good about your job? Is it your title? Is it your pay? I mean, you could have essentially no title. You could be an associate. I come up with some generic word. You're a manager of X, But if you're getting paid some ridiculous amount of money, does that matter? Maybe it does. And if you're having some fancy title, like you are the director of XYZ, the chief creative officer of something, does your pay matter? How much does pay relate to salary? How much does salary relate to whatever the other hallmarks of happiness that you have or that you need in your professional life to be content, to have satisfaction, to have a rewarding career? What are the elements of that you need in your position to feel happy? I know for myself in the military, rank was this apple, this carrot right out of reach that you were always going for. It didn't matter whether you were whatever rank you were always striving, moving towards the next thing. I used to describe my career as Captain Kirk in training because there was the joke, and not everyone felt this way, certainly, but there was the joke that every Mars officer, now referred to as a naval warfare officer, every naval warfare officer wanted to be the CEO of a ship. And that was like the carrot that everyone was reaching for. And some people along the way decided that wasn't the carrot they were looking for. They were happy with being a lieutenant for life. And why not? Being whatever your position is, are you a petty officer, chief petty officer? Are you a chief warrant officer, sergeant, corporal, leading seaman, colonel, captain, lieutenant, whatever your rank is, whatever your position is, whatever your role is in the military, are you happy where you are and what you're doing? Are you finding reward? Are you excelling in that thing that you're doing? Not everyone, not all the naval warfare officers in the Royal Canadian Navy are going to be captains. There's not enough positions, there's not enough availability, there's not enough throughput to make that happen. Not everyone's going to be that was my phone buzzing, pardon me. Not everyone's going to be an admiral. Not everyone's going to be a coxswain. Not everyone's going to be a chief. What in your career brings you happiness? So I say that. So we're coming up on 30 minutes here, and I want to try and keep within 30 minutes. But one more thing that I want to mention in the last couple minutes here is a podcast I came across that really touched on one of the key core components that I have when it comes to the content I create for you. Know your worth. One of the big things about coming out of the military is a lot of us have a lack of direction, a lack of understanding, a lack of awareness as to how valuable we are or are not. We have a misaligned sense of our self-worth. Some people come out and think for example, we were just talking about rank. I was a chief, I was a colonel, I was a captain, I was a this, I was a that. And therefore, I should get paid X, or I should be in this kind of role, in this kind of position. And I do not want to disparage or take away the significance or take away the accolades of any of you for any of the positions that you took. But I want to be very clear about one thing, is that when we come from the military environment, and be very clear that the military is its own bubble, and there is a community, a culture, it is its own kind of ecosystem. And once you step outside of that ecosystem, the skill sets, the positions, the things that made you successful in that environment or of significance in that environment may not apply as you step out. So if you were, and this happens, this kind of jarring reality check or juxtaposition happens to almost everybody as they transition out, unless they have the foresight to be kind of self-aware of themselves and aware of the environment they're stepping into. But unfortunately, many of us don't have that. So when you step out into the civvy world, those command skills, those perhaps technical skills that you had are not immediately applicable in the civilian space. And I'll give you an example. As a naval warfare officer, my accreditations, my credentials in the military, which are military credentials, do not seamlessly transfer into civilian qualifications. In Canada, the military offers you or gives you certain accreditations. For example, you can get a command qualification. Before that, you get the bridge watchkeeping certificate as a naval warfare officer. Those qualifications don't translate into Transport Canada, which is the civilian regulatory body, don't translate into a civilian equivalency. Whereas perhaps some other organizations provide an equivalency accreditation. So, for example, if you had a military accreditation for a bridge watchkeeping certificate, would Transport Canada offer you, say, oh yes, you've met all the requirements for whatever the equivalency would be in their ecosystem or their accreditation kind of ladder and profile, they would just give it to you. They don't do that. You have to sit a board or sit a test, write an exam, and kind of earn that accreditation. And you have to have the right amount of hours, and you have to have the appropriate amount of kind of like, just like any trade, you have to have the right amount of hours logged to be able to sit those exams, because they're not going to waste their time having people sit and write those exams that aren't going to pass. So all that to say that whatever the qualifications are and the significance you had don't readily translate into the civilian world. And so when you move into the civilian space and you're not recognized, you don't have the status of having all those ticks in the box, and it can be jarring. You might think that you were paid, let's say you were paid $100,000. Benefits, whatever it be. You were paid $100,000. That was your salary. You step into the civilian space. Maybe your role in the hierarchy is not worth $100,000. Maybe it's worth more. Maybe it's worth less. Oftentimes, we are worth less for those kinds of positions. And unfortunately, with the exception of technical trades, this happens much more with senior NCOs. And senior NCOs will have a lot of management experience, but that management experience doesn't translate into a salary equivalent to maybe what they were making. And that's a hard pill to swallow. If you were a chief warrant officer or a chief petty officer, first class, like the top of the NCM world, and you step into the civilian space, you won't get the same recognition. You won't get the same equivalency of pay and benefits that you necessarily did in the military. And the same thing's true for admirals and captains and so on. Essentially, any flag officer is a C-suite executive, right? Even captains of ships and units are in their own executives of those units. And so they have a lot of power and latitude and locus of control on how they operate those organizations, those units, those commands. When you step into the civilian world, you don't have that same acknowledgement of your skill set, at least inherently. You have to kind of prove it, display it, demonstrate it. And so there's now, granted, if you're a flag officer and you're retiring at the end of your career, maybe that's not a concern for you because you've got and same thing with if you're a chief, you're pensioned out, you've got your maximum pension, you're financially you're well set. But if you want to go and do something else, you're not done. You professional in your professional life, you have more to contribute, more to do, more to accomplish. You need to just be aware that transition may not be, you may not have a lateral transition. You might have to step down. That may be something you have to do. On the same note, and I wanted to give you the bad first so I can come over the top with the good. At the same time, you are a military veteran. You are a known quality asset. You are, for lack of a better way to describe it, you're awesome. If you're a technical trade, you have however many years that you've done the technical trade at a high level of performance in high stress situations, and depending on the platform, for example, in the Navy, on a mobile platform. Welder, pipe fitter, electrician, carpenter, whatever your trade is. Are you a combat engineer? Are you even something as simple as and I don't mean to say it's simple, but like a very laterally transferring trade like a cook? You've been able to perform in very interesting circumstances, and as a cook, you have military skills that don't necessarily translate directly from your trade as being a cook. The military skills, you still need to have the leadership and organizational and project management skills that come with being military above and beyond your trade skills. And the military skill set, the military mindset is one of your greatest assets. So when you go into an organization, they may not initially recognize your skills. You need to demonstrate that, but understand and be aware of your worth. Know your worth. The podcast I'm referring to, and I'll get back to it. So the podcast that I'm referring to is a podcast by the name of the After Action Review. The After Action Review podcast, hosted by Deedon Rodriguez, a contact I have on LinkedIn. He had a recent episode with Rachel Cozy, and in that conversation, and there's a little clip of it in that I found on LinkedIn, and then I went back and listened to the whole podcast. But in the clip, they talk about Rachel's experience of transitioning out of the military and basically being lowballed by the company that she was going into. They were making claims that she didn't have whatever the value proposition that they were looking for to be able to give her the salary perhaps that she was looking for. And that this had a long-term effect on her in the sense that the way the organization was structured, it affected her ability to progress and be compensated appropriately because there was only an incremental amount of salary increase she could ever earn with every promotion. The big thing about knowing your worth is knowing you relative to everybody else. Because unfortunately, and this is a terrible way to think about it sometimes, but you're a commodity. We are all commodities to a certain degree when it comes to the employment market. We are an asset to be deployed by an organization to accomplish their goals. Unless you're an entrepreneur and you are the organization. But let's put that aside for a sec. So if you're going to work for a larger organization, you are an HR asset. You are something that is deployable to them. And I've mentioned this in other episodes, in other videos, talking about the changing role of employment. As a military member in the military, you were a raw recruit, and you were trained and formed and molded into whatever the military needed you to be. They had a clear career progression path that they put you on, and they put you in positions and moved you along that track as they required, as the military needed, and as a consequence, it fulfilled your career goals. But no mistake about it, the Navy needed you to fill those roles, not so much as they owed you anything. So they fill that role. And the same thing with companies and organizations here. They are looking for people to fill roles, and they're just looking for the right key to fit the keyhole. And if they can get it at a lower cost, they will. But knowing your worth and going into that conversation and that situation, important to do your background, like research and background of the organization, understand what it is they do, and understand the skill sets that you bring unique to you as a military veteran and the military mindset that you bring, and how that makes you stand apart from the, and I'll say average civilian. The military mindset, assuming you have that, which as a military veteran, I'm going to assume that you do, and that you were, and that you are a good example of the military mindset. You have the tenacity, the drive, the energy, the ability to operate independently, the executive function to be able to make decisions, carry them out, and get them done without all the information required, but get them done to a high degree of efficacy. That is, and I am constantly surprised by how that is not the norm. My standards are constantly not met by the people around me because I guess my standards are too high. And that kills me to say that, because in the military, we rely on everybody else to be able to do what they're doing in order for us to do what we do. We're a team. We're all working together, whether it's a platoon, a ship, a fleet, what have you. We're all working together to get the job done, to accomplish the mission. And everyone needs to operate at a high level of performance in order for us to do what we have to do. When you're out there in the civvy world, not everybody is operating at that level. Some people are just kind of punching their time in, and maybe, their job is not dangerous, lives are not on the line, and there's not a severe degree of consequence for them to underperform. And therefore, that all they need to do is just meet the tick in the box. And granted, in the military, we all know about meeting the ticks in the box. But our idol, our 60% idol is, I would argue, as a military member and a veteran, your 60% idol is other people's 80 and 90% level of performance. Just naturally, because of the discipline that you have, the experience that you have, and the culture in which has produced you and produced the military mindset within you, you are much more effective than you perhaps give yourself credit for. And that is a universally applicable, transferable skill set that you can apply to any role and any job. The problem is in a job interview and when having a salary negotiation, you need to be able to translate that and communicate that to your employer. So before we, and like I say, I've gone over my half-hour time limit here. I'm now coming up on 41 minutes. I will definitely create a video about this again in the future, and perhaps we can have a live stream conversation about that. But I strongly encourage you to evaluate yourself, be self-aware, and know your worth. And of course, check out that podcast. Again, it's called the After Action Review. You can find it on Apple iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. And look for episode 58 with Rachel Cozy. At the time of this live stream, it'll be one of the more recent episodes. And of course, you can find it on LinkedIn. Look for Deedon Rod Rodriguez. He is the host of that program, and he's the one who posted that episode. So that's all for me for today. Thank you so much for joining me, for watching the replay, and looking forward to next Wednesday when we have part 3 of our LinkedIn basics. And I want to be able to see your comments and reviews. Thank you, everybody, for all the shares on LinkedIn and the views on YouTube. Phenomenal. Thank you so much for that support. I'm happy that content is providing value for you. And I want to hear from you about what I can do in the future to continue to provide that value for you. What do you want to hear about? And for example, for this live stream, since we're talking about the live stream, when do you want to see this? Is Friday at 3 o'clock Pacific time or 1500? Is that a good time for you? Do you want it at another time? I'm conscious of the different time zones. So, for example, this is 6 o'clock on the East Coast, and all the time zones in between. But I want to be able to put this out there when there's kind of the best opportunity for you to engage with the live stream. Of course, you can watch the replay, but what time works best for you? Let me know in the comments below. And I look forward to reading them. So thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you in the next episode.